taking forward and keeping up the torch of learning. Let us move ahead with the next segment and our first keynote presentation for the day. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, who is a successful entrepreneur, investor, and philanthropist who has made significant contributions to the Indian startup ecosystem. Under his leadership, Dr. Vaidya has become one of the fastest growing startups in India and has bagged several records and awards. Yes, my friends, I'm talking about Mr. Arjun Vaidya. In addition to his entrepreneurial pursuits, Mr. Vaidya has been recognized for his contributions and to the community and has received several accolades for his work. He's the first Ayurvedic entrepreneur to be featured in Forbes 30 under 30 list, Asia list, and Business World 40 under 40 list. So he's also an active early stage investor and angel investor helping startups through V3 Ventures. So without doing further ado, please join me to give a warm welcome to Mr. Arjun Vaidya.
Okay, good afternoon, Surat. I have the privilege or the issue of having the pre-lunch session. So I'll just wait till my friend Sunny Garg comes and sits in the audience. But I'll just wait for everyone to settle down. Before I start talking about what I wanted to discuss and talk about my journey, I wanted to say I'm really, really happy to be here in Surat. The first time I came across the idea of this event was a random DM from Rachit on LinkedIn. And I thought to myself when I got that DM, are you really calling me to Surat? Like, what's happening in Surat? Why are you calling me 6 months in advance for an event in Surat? I came to the event last year with not such high expectations, to be honest. And I was absolutely blown away. I was blown away at the event, the organization, the energy, the ecosystem. And being a proud Gujarati myself, I think it was just an amazing, amazing place to be. At that event last year, and I was here this same weekend last year, Rachit and Prateek blocked my calendar to be here this year. And so I've been blocked to come for this event since last year. I was in Calcutta yesterday. I flew back to Bombay, reached my house at 2:30 a.m. They booked me on a 6 a.m. train so that I could make it in time for my keynote, which was supposed to be at 12. It's now at 1:15. But I had to do it because there is something special at this place, at this event. And that something special is actually about all of us coming together and about creating an ecosystem in a place that didn't have so much about startups going on. And so before I start, I actually wanted to say a big thank you to the Ivy Growth Associates team, to Rachit, to Sharat, to Prateek, for putting this together, for bringing everyone together, and for dreaming, right? I remember being here last year. The event was smaller, the audience was smaller, but there was a lot of love and affection to the event, to the curation, and to all of these things. And so last year was a sort of start, and this year's even bigger and better, and you've got some amazing things lined up for all of you. And so I'm really excited to be here and spend time with all of you and be a part of this event. My name is Arjun Vaidya, and as they introduced me, Vaidya, my last name means Ayurvedic doctor. I come from a legacy of 150 years of Ayurveda. My grandfather, great-grandfather, and generations before, all Ayurvedic doctors. I'm going to talk about my journey as a founder, going from zero to creating an outcome which was one of India's first D2C exits. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about failure. I'm going to talk to you about getting humbled, being humble, a little bit of achievement, and then sort of moving on from there to my journey as an investor. So bear with me as I take you through this journey, and hopefully there are some learnings for all of you in this journey of 5 or 7 years that I had. So I said my grandfather and great-grandfather were Ayurvedic doctors. The legacy of my business actually wasn't a business. The legacy of my business was one Ayurvedic clinic, which my great-grandfather set up in Bombay. He moved from Morbi, where my family is originally from, near Rajkot in Gujarat, to Bombay, set up this Ayurvedic clinic. As was customary at the time, my grandfather graduated from Ayurvedic college and took on his father's practice of Ayurveda. He became an Ayurvedic doctor. He worked with his father in the clinic. In 1971, he took on his father's practice and started running the clinic. My grandfather didn't care for sales, distribution, marketing, strategy. He didn't care to sort of build a business out of it. He's a doctor. He cared for service. Consultation was free at this clinic. And so he was always concerned by giving people the best treatment, the best healing. My father graduated from college in the late 80s, and he wanted to start a business. He wanted to be a businessman. So he tried to convince my grandfather to do TV advertising for his Ayurvedic products. My grandfather agreed. My grandfather did this big TV campaign in the late 80s for this product called HerboFit and lost money for the first time in his life. Now, for all of you who know doctors, CAs or lawyers, they don't lose money. They just make less or more in every year, right? And so my grandfather told my dad at the end of that escapade of going on a TV campaign, look, I'm not here to do any of this business. If you want to work with me, work in my clinic, or else do your own thing. Right? And so eventually my dad went to set up a business. He learned how to make jewelry and he spent time understanding craftsmanship and now runs a very successful business in the jewelry and watch space. That's actually my family business. That's what he's been doing for the last 35 years. But I grew up with asthma. I grew up with juvenile bronchitis. I suffered. I grew up with pumps, nebulizers, inhalers, steroids. I'm telling you this story because all founders have a deep personal journey in what they end up doing, right? And there's always something about what you go through that ends up leading to what you end up doing, right? So, warm welcome to my friends Sushant, Bindal and Ganesh walking into the audience a little bit late for my session. So, I grew up being the only kid who couldn't play cricket and football because there was too much dust on the cricket field. I grew up being the only kid who couldn't have Coke, Limca, Fanta, Sprite while all my friends were having it because it would jack my throat. I grew up being that kid who at age 13 went with his parents to Baskin-Robbins for the first time on a Sunday evening, had Baskin-Robbins vanilla ice cream, but had to wait till it was melted in a cup and had ice cream soup. So obviously, asthma prevented me from having what I would call a normal childhood. And that annoyed me, right? And obviously my family saw it as well. My grandfather saw it. I got an Ayurvedic treatment very early on in life. I got an Ayurvedic treatment at age 3. And by age 15 and a half, I was cured of asthma. What's the first thing I went and did after I got cured of asthma? I went and played cricket, right? So I couldn't play cricket all my life. So I said, okay, let me play cricket. During the time that my grandfather was treating me, I used to spend a lot of time with him. He was a man of tremendous discipline, right? He wore a white safari suit with black shoes and a 5 rupee red pen in his pocket every single day to work. And so I learned that consistency and discipline was what made him who he was. So when I joined this cricket team or set up this cricket team in my school, and by the way, it was an international school, there were not so many people who wanted to play cricket. There were not so many people who were interested in playing cricket. I ensured that I was the guy who went to every single practice. There were only like 12, 13 people who were interested in playing cricket. Out of them, only 5, 7 showed up to some practices. But I became captain of my school cricket team. When I asked the coach why he made me captain, he said, you are the most sincere and honest player on our team. You're definitely not the best player. And that started making me think about the hard work and discipline that I learned from my grandfather, right? I graduated from high school at 17 and a half. I went to the US for my undergrad. I promised my grandfather I will study biotechnology, I'll study biochemistry, and I'll take on his legacy. I studied economics and politics. My grandfather stopped paying for my education. But I learned a lot about marketing of what is traditionally Indian in the US. It sounds counterintuitive, but in my first week of college, my Dutch friend across the hall from me taught me yoga. And I started thinking to myself, like, why is she teaching me? I'm coming from India, and why is she teaching me yoga? And then I saw yoga mats, yoga gyms, yoga apparel, Lululemon, and this multi-billion-dollar industry in the US. And I called my grandfather from campus and I said, hey, it's amazing that yoga is global, but what's not so amazing is Indian companies have nothing to do with the proliferation of yoga. They have nothing to do with making it global, right? And so I promised him at some point I'll come back and take on his legacy. I graduated from college in 2013. I came back to India. I'm a very patriotic person. I wear this band with the Indian flag on my hand. I've been wearing it for the last 13 years. And so I didn't stay in the US at all. I didn't get any job experience, work experience in the US. I came back to India. I worked in finance for 3 years at a private equity fund investing in consumer products. But every founder has that one moment, right? Ayurveda was at the back of my mind. Taking forward my grandfather's legacy was at the back of my mind. And then my grandfather passed. And when he passed, he left behind a legacy. He left behind some formulations. He left behind a small manufacturing facility. And he left behind this thought in my mind. I was thinking about taking forward his legacy, but I was a 23-year-old, 24-year-old guy working in private equity, earning 30 lakhs a year. And that was very, very good money for me at that time. And so it was very difficult for me to take that step and quit my job. And, I learned from speaking to so many entrepreneurs now that you have to just rip off the band-aid and take that step. It's not easy. It's not easy to let go of the axe at 24 years old. But I was at my dad's 50th birthday. This is after my grandfather passed. I gave a talk like this about my dad and what he had taught me. And after the talk, my grandfather's nurse of 17 years came up to me with a tear in her eye and she said, "You're talking about your father's legacy, but are you going to let your grandfather's legacy die?" And that was the moment on April 7th, 2016 that I said, whatever this 30 lakh salary is, whatever this comfortable job is, whatever this prestigious job is, I'm letting it go. And so I quit my job without any idea what exactly I want to do, but I knew I wanted to take forward my grandfather's legacy. I started a company called Dr. Vaidya, named it after my grandfather, to make Ayurveda appealing and accessible to modern consumers. I wanted to talk to you now about excitement and failure. I started this company with huge excitement. I had a big launch event in a room like this. I was talking to an audience as big as this. 6 distributors in that audience signed up and said, "We're going to buy your products." We went offline. We put 10 lakhs of stock in market. And the financial analyst in me started going on this Excel sheet, putting 10 lakhs, 15 lakhs, 20 lakhs, 1 crore, 5 crores. And on that Excel sheet, it looked like in 12 months, his business was doing 7-8 crores a month. The reality, 3 months later, when I went to collect money from those 6 distributors, they gave me 90% of the product back and 1 lakh rupees in cash. I asked them why. They said, "Nobody bought your product." So then I understood how this offline distribution thing works, right? As a manufacturer, I had to bill to distributors. Distributors had to bill to retailers. Retailers had to bill to Sunny. Only when Sunny bought my product would I get paid. But neither Sunny, nor Jivraj, nor Ganesh, nor Sushant bought any of my product. And so eventually, all this product came back to me. Now, as a 24-and-a-half-year-old who quit this job, had all of this excitement towards building this business, I was shell-shocked. I went to my room on a Friday evening. I locked the door. I didn't come out of my room till Monday morning. I missed a cousin's wedding that weekend because I just didn't know what hit me, right? But eventually, good sense prevailed. I had a very understanding girlfriend at that time who's now the wife and the mother to my 5-month-old baby. And she said, "Look, there is definitely something that went wrong. You had no right to win. You had no capital, no knowledge of building offline. And how are you going to stand up in front of Dabur, Imami, Patanjali, Baidyanath, Zandu and Himalaya in the offline market?" But she had graduated from college in the UK, worked at Goldman in the UK, and then she came back to India and worked at Nykaa in the founding team. And she said, "Look, there is no one doing this thing online with Ayurveda, right? So why don't you give it a shot?" We got engaged in mid-2017 and I convinced her to join the business. That's when the fate of Dr. Vaidya turned. But the failure of offline was what allowed me to think of online and eventually got me to this business. In November 2017, we launched a website. We learned online business. We learned sales, distribution. We learned Facebook, Google advertising. We learned customer service. I picked up the phone with my first 1,000 customers, talked to each one of them. And in 1 year, we got to 50 orders a day. All these investors talk about this famous concept, PMF, product market fit. At 50 orders a day, when I woke up every morning, I knew that whatever I did, or whatever I didn't do, if I didn't even show up to the office, I'd get that 50 orders a day. And that's when, as an entrepreneur who was waiting for 2.5 years to get some feeling of business, we started smelling the business. Long story short, over the next 2 years, we built India's largest Ayurveda brand online. We scaled from 0 to 5,000 orders a day. We hit 2 million transacting customers. But the best part is what I'm going to tell you now. It was 2 million transacting customers across 16,500 pin codes in India. Dr. Vaidya's from one warehouse in Bombay reached 65% of India's pin codes. Our customers, by the way, were not from Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore, Hyderabad, Surat, Ahmedabad. Our customers were from Muzaffarnagar, Anantnag, Trichy and Imphal. And what I realized from speaking to my customer, and having conversations with my customer, picking up the phone and talking to my customer. This is advice I give to every single D2C founder I speak to. Be close to your customer, speak to your customer, engage with your customer. What I learned from that was that actually the customer did not behave exactly like me. And so me using my sort of mental behavior, my consumption behavior was not the right way to approach this customer. Advertising initially was minimalistic, all in English. Our advertising moved completely to Hindi, English, and regional languages because that's what our customer was. And so as a founder, especially in the consumer space, you have to have the humility to step back and say, I don't know the answer. Someone else knows the answer, right? We raised some money and, we talk a lot about investment in this event and this conference. We raised some money from RP Sanjeev Goenka Group in June 2019. In December 2020, we had a crazy run through COVID. So they made an offer to acquire our business. Now, I'm going to preempt the question that you guys are going to ask me. Everyone talks about this celebrated exit and you're going to ask me, you had this family legacy. It was such a deep, deep, deep association to you. How could you sell this business and how could you sell your family name, right? So at that time, we were doing 5,000 orders a day. The business had reached 8 crores a month in sales. But as a founder, when your business is hitting resistance in scale, right? And at the scale we had 5,000 orders, I did not see us being able to reach 7,000, 8,000, 10,000 orders very easily online. And so the next leg of the journey for us was offline. I was a colossal failure offline, and I'm open about it even today. If you ask me to start an offline business, even with all the experience I have, I'll not be able to do it, right? And so knowing the business would be built offline and the next leg of growth would be built offline, and also getting a very fair offer in terms of valuation and outcome, I sat down with my wife. We built the business together and I said, is this the right time? Now, as a founder, only you know the right time, right? Only I knew that was the right time for me. If I ask half of you in this audience, you'd say you sold too early. The other half would say you sold at the perfect time. Perfect time we'll know only in 5 years. But for us at that time, it felt like the right time. And so regardless of what people said around us, we took that tough decision to exit. I remember I don't cry very easily, but the time I went to my office and I told my team I'm leaving this business was the only time I've ever cried in my office. I went to my office on our last day of work. I'm a big fan of cricket, as you guys know. And so I had this moment where I was getting out of the lift, and from the lift to my chair, there was my entire team clapping for me, giving us roses, giving us notes and messages. I felt like a batsman who had scored 100 at Lords and was sort of going back to the dressing room. But that was the last time I went to this office. We ripped off the Band-Aid, we left the business, and that was a journey, sort of taking a business from zero to exit in the D2C space. What did I learn from this? And I'm not going to give you sort of tips on investing, and I'm not going to tell you how I invest. I've invested in a few companies. I run a VC fund, but I'm very early, and so the people who came before me actually know much more. But what did I learn from the startup journey, from building Dr. Vaidya's, from taking it from zero to exit and being able to have the good fortune of exiting my business before the age of 30? Largely, I learned 3 things. I'm here wearing this jacket, wearing these cool sneakers. Some people are taking photos. It seems like this whole entrepreneurship thing is super glamorous, right? The reality is that while it seems glamorous from funding news and newspapers and what we see on Instagram Reels, which wasn't there when I was building my business, entrepreneurship is a grind. It's not easy. It's not about the funding news. It's about a daily grind of going from failure to failure. And I'm not good at it yet, or I'm not great at it yet. I've gotten better at it. But the best founders are the ones who fight failure with grit and resilience. That's learning number 1. Have a thick skin, fight failure with grit and resilience, and get up every time you fail. There's a song I used to listen to a lot when I was growing up. It's a song by a band called Chamba Wamba. It's called Tub Thumping, right? Maybe some of you guys know that song. And the chorus of the song, the guy says, I get knocked down, but I get up again. You're never going to keep me down. And that's the motto I feel for any successful entrepreneur. The second learning, you can't do it alone, right? I told you the story of convincing my wife to join the business, but even 2 of us wasn't enough for this business. We needed more and more empowered hands. And to be honest, I was immature when I started my business. I thought I was better than everyone at everything. And so I would work 16 hours a day, but after 13, 14 hours, you're not working efficiently. 2 people working 12 or 14 hours a day, or 8 people working 10 hours a day. The only way you can get compounded growth in your startup is if you build an empowered team from the early stage. It's a big mistake I made. It took me 2.5 years to figure this out. And so hopefully this advice will some of you guys not make the same mistake I made. The last learning, and this is a learning to the more young folks in the audience or the people who are thinking of starting up or who want to start up, entrepreneurship is not part-time. I tried to do it for a little bit. I tried to say, okay, I'll continue my job. I'll do my startup on nights and weekends. And when my startup starts scaling is when I'll quit my job. That doesn't happen. Entrepreneurship is full-time. You can't be slightly pregnant with entrepreneurship. Either in or you're out. It's okay to be out. But if you're in, you've got to be 100% in. And, through that journey of being a founder, I grew up, I got engaged, I got married. We built a team of 150 people who are now doing amazing things. We faced a lot of failures, but we grew up a lot. And, if people ask me, what would you change in the journey? I think that journey defined who I became today. So for all of you who are entrepreneurs, who are going through sort of tougher times in your business, waiting for the moment to scale up, trust the journey and trust the process, and it'll come around. You'll hit that inflection point. I think the last thing I'd like to say before I end this session, I started my company in October 2016. I've had the good fortune of meeting thousands of founders over the last 2 years as an investor. And I will say that we are so much better off than we were in October 2016. We have events like this. We have an ecosystem. We have respect. We have community. We have an infrastructure. We have so many people, like my friend Jivraj, who's sitting up in front, doing selfless work to build this ecosystem and community. And so, other than the fact that things are better, India is doing better, I think what I wanted to say is that most of you are actually much better than me. When I meet founders today, I see them being so much better than I was when I was starting my business and running my business. And so, my sort of end note or the thing I'd like to say to you, and again, as I said, I'm very patriotic. The next decade is ours. The next decade is India's. People may say this, but I work in a global fund now and I see what's happening in Europe. I see what's happening in the US. And I see something special happening in our country. So to all of you, thank you for having me here in Surat. Stay hungry, stay foolish, and keep building. That was my time, but thank you so much for having me. And I don't know if we have time for questions. I don't know if we do, but are we doing questions or no?
Hi guys, I'm Janvi. I'm the founder of Shastaka Wellness. I have a stall downstairs, and which is why I was late. I'm so sorry about it. But great session, Arjun. And I think the question that I, mostly as founders we have is, we're looking for the right mentors and right experts to, onboard our team. So at what stage or what time do you feel is the right time to have these mentors or advisors on board?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I'll talk about my experience. One mistake I made and then one thing I did right. The mistake I made is I got all of these people who were really, really good at their work and very famous people in their industry. But I didn't find a way to buy them into my company. And so I put them on my website. I put 4 people on my website, but I didn't find a way to buy them into my company. And so they would get on a call with me once in a while. But when I wanted their time once a month, there was no reason for them to give me that time. So when you're looking for a mentor, ensure that you find a way to buy them in. The only mentor who gave me time once a week or once a month was my dad, but he was also the largest shareholder in the company, right? So I think the first thing I would say is definitely find a way to buy the mentor in. The second thing I would say is that be very ambitious about who you choose as your mentor. If you are willing to bring someone on board who's with you for the journey, don't go for someone just because you know them. Go for someone who you think is the best person who can help. Obviously, there has to be a vibe match. You have to get to know each other better. But I would always recommend, and the best sportsmen in the world, Sachin, Usain Bolt, Michael Schumacher, Lionel Messi, they all have coaches, right? And so even if you're really, really good, there is always someone who can guide you, coach you, and be your mirror. And so I would always recommend it from day one.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for being such a great audience.